And Lieutenant Governor, thanks very much for your time tonight. It's great to see you.
Fun to be here again.
So this is probably our last time together, which is kind of sad, actually. And I just want to start out by getting your opinion on the failed New York City OTB bailout.
You know, Liz, I followed a lot of things very closely. I can't say that I have followed that carefully enough to give you a meaningful view of it.
But in terms of, it seems a little bit like endemic of the problem in Albany, which is that people are too willing to play politics, perhaps, and not willing to face the hard problems that you have been talking about for over a year now.
I think it is an example of not dealing with it one way or the other, because the dollars aren't going to go away.
Right. And the budget battle that is coming up to Albany, do you think that Andrew Cuomo really is going to be able to make those decisions, those hard decisions?
You know, I've asked that question all the time, and the only answer I can give is, number one, he's bright. Two, he certainly understood when he ran for office that he can't offer more benefits to the people of this state, that he's got to cut, and that's a big step forward. Number three, we won't know until February 1st. And one of the many reasons I recommended that the fiscal year be changed to June 30th was it's absolutely absurd to think that a newly elected governor can, in 30 days, come up with a budget, which is the single most important thing a governor does in any year.
Well, he is already working on it, right? Don't you believe?
Of course. I believe he's working very intently, and I think any speculation as to where he's going to come out is kind of pointless.
You know, this opportunity of sitting down with you last time gives me a chance to go back on some things that I never really got to ask you. And you met with him once during the campaign. Do you remember that story? There was a story about that you were having some kind of secret meeting with Andrew Cuomo, and
oh, that was months and months ago. That was during the period where there was some belief that Governor Patterson was going to resign and I was going to be governor.
Right. And what did you and Andrew Cuomo discuss? Do you remember?
I do, but I don't think it's terribly relevant. I think he was curious as to what I might do if I were governor, and we chatted. And
what did you tell him? Are you disappointed that you never got to be governor?
No.
Did you think that you might when you accepted the job from David Patterson?
No, I had no reason to believe that David would ever resign. I mean, I saw the stories that developed during that period where there was a lot of speculation that he would, but I never expected that he would.
Do you think that that was part of the reason why they froze you out a little bit? Because
who's they?
Well, the Patterson administration didn't use you to the fullest extent that they might have.
Well, look, the simple truth is that lieutenant governors don't have a governmental function under the way our system works. They never have. That's why a lot of them quit.
Like Al Del Bello, for example.
Al Del Bello, right. And second of all, there were two fundamental reasons why I was asked. One, they were concerned about the possible succession if anything had happened to David Patterson, and two, if one believes what they said, and I do, they recognized we were in a fiscal mess and they wanted somebody who had knowledge and credibility.
But they never took your advice.
They did not take my advice.
And why was
correct.
that, do you think?
I don't know, to be honest with you. It's a matter of great curiosity for me, but I know that Larry Schwartz was very dismissive of the ideas, and reportedly the Attorney General was, as he communicated to the Associated Press. That was as described to me by Paul Francis, and I never had an opportunity to discuss the merits one way or the other.
Well, we're talking about your what got shorthanded as your borrowing plan, right?
Yeah, well, that's because some people chose to dismiss it by characterizing it that way. That was a very incidental part of the fundamental objectives.
But you've since said, you're doing a couple of these sort of final interviews and appearances, and you've since said that you feel very badly, and this you said in the city, that I really have accomplished very little. Yeah,
well, I meant that I wasn't able to persuade people to address this problem more seriously. One of my failures was not enabling the press or making the press pay more attention to it. I appreciate the fact that you always have, but there were still, in our most august journals, more column inches devoted to Hiram Montserrat and Peter Spada than there ever were to the budget. So I wasn't able to convince people. I never had a vote, never pretended to have a vote. I talked to hundreds of legislators. I talked to thousands of people about this, and I wasn't able to persuade people that the situation was grave enough that we had to do things differently.
Yeah, but with all due respect, I mean, if you had had assistance in a partner from a strong governor, it might have been different.
Well, I don't think, for whatever set of reasons, and it's silly and not helpful to speculate anything about David Patterson's reasons for not supporting it. I don't know why he didn't, and the fact of the matter was that the Republicans were going to be against anything that he supported, and whereas some of the Democrats in the Senate thought it was a great idea, a lot didn't, for a variety of very different reasons, and there was never really any meaningful dialogue, and there was no staff that really espoused the idea, and that's very critical in the legislative process. On the other hand, I had detailed discussions with the staff in the Assembly and with the Speaker and with probably 75 members of the Democratic caucus.
Do you think that might have hurt you and undercut your efforts because you were viewed as perhaps an ally of the Assembly Speaker?
You know, I'm smiling because
you
would think in a healthy world, the people around the governor might say, isn't it great that Shelley and Ravitch have some respect for each other? They didn't consider it an asset, according to your description. So I think it's absolutely silly. I mean, I know that somebody told some journalist once that I was Shelley's secret agent. I mean, that's nonsense. I have a pretty good idea who it was, but it's sort of silly.
Do you want to tell us who it was?
No, I don't know.
I mean, you know, the reason why I ask is because, again, not only because there's the intrigue factor, and that's interesting, but because there's been a lot of speculation now going forward about what kind of relationship the incoming governor might have with the Speaker, because let's face it, he's a powerful guy, he's been the dominant force in Albany for a long time, and nothing's going to get done without him. So what do you think the relationship will be with Shelley Silver and Andrew Cuomo?
You know, I have no idea. I think that Shelley Silver is what a legislator should be, leader should be. He has a lot of sensitivity not to be out of sync with his conference, how to get people to compromise, how to get his conference behind a point of view. So Shelley's initial reaction to something doesn't necessarily mean that's the way he's going to come out at the end, because his conference shapes him and he shapes the conference. He also has a staff with a lot of unbelievably talented people on it who have, when you get into the weeds on particularly the fiscal stuff, you're talking about things that are very complicated. So he has the advice of some very, very talented people.
Because, you know, it's speculated that he's going to be the trouble. He'll be the stumbling block. He'll be, at this point at least, it's being cast that way, that it's good for Andrew Cuomo to have the Republicans in control of the Senate because they're more in line with his fiscally conservative message, whereas the Assembly Democrats, led by Shelley Silver, have been more attuned to, say, a more progressive agenda, if you would. Protecting unions is the real issue, of course.
You know, Liz, the truth of the matter is that the proposals I made, which would have put an enormous amount of discipline into the process, which were not supported by the unions, the only one who supported them was the Speaker of the Assembly. So I don't believe that Shelley is unaware of the seriousness of this. I haven't talked policy with him recently at all, but I mean, he understands very well the numbers. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that we're close to being broke.
How close to being broke are we?
Well, I mean, we always have ways of producing cash. We can keep kicking the can forward, which we've been doing for 20 years, and with very little explanation in the media, we keep doing it. The banks have infinite ways of facilitating the borrowing of money, and our whole system, since it's based not on a meaningful, generally accepted accounting principle, methodology of budgeting, it's based on cash.
Right.
So if you can produce cash by taking money out of reserve funds, by borrowing, by selling assets, and you have enough cash to meet tomorrow's bills, doesn't matter how much you push forward.
And also there's the little creative bookkeeping trick that you can do by booking this year's debt or bills into next year's balance
Of course,
sheet, right?
That's why I say it's just cash. It's the same thing. It's only a cash system. And ultimately, at some point in time, because this isn't sustainable, it'll have to come to an end.
You know, you actually, it's interesting to me that you speak about the frustration about dealing with Albany, but you had ample experience in dealing with Albany. For example, the MTA bailout, you were tapped to handle that, and you had a devil of a time actually dealing with the legislature they didn't want to accept your tolling the bridges, for example.
Well, I'm sorry, the Assembly accepted it fully.
No, I understand. But what I'm saying is, it takes 3 people to tango in Albany, of course.
Well, I understand that, but you know better than I do that a Senate that was almost equally divided doesn't function very well, particularly when both sides were largely preoccupied with this November's election.
True.
And who was going to control it.
So is it better now? Is the state better off that it looks like the Senate is under Republican control?
I have no idea how that's going to play out.
Well, let's assume that it looks like it's going to be under Republican control.
Who's switchable? It sure does.
Who's switchable?
I'm not sure. I have no idea.
But what do you mean by that?
I mean that who would have imagined that several Democrats would have voted to organize the Senate as Republicans?
You're talking about last summer's
never-ending,
right?
The never-ending source of surprise. But hopefully, the seriousness of the state's problems will result in some stability in the Senate this year.
Well, do you believe that Shelley Silver might be willing at some point, and his conference, because as you note, it really is the conference that's driving, and particularly in this issue, redistricting reform?
Well, you know, I've asked that question a lot. I'm much more interested, forget the methodology of redistricting, how do we get bright young people to go into politics? I respectfully suggest that's a far more serious problem than where you draw the district lines.
Why is that?
Why is that? Because what you care about is the quality of the people that are elected to our legislature. Why do you automatically assume that that if you draw the district lines in a way that is independent, whatever that means? I've never quite understood who appoints an independent districting commission, other than people who are elected to office.
Right, it's giving one layer. It's giving a layer of
You can't take the politics out of
insulation.
politics. I'm not against it. Ed Koch and I have talked about this a lot. I'm not against it. I just am dubious whether it makes any difference. But let's see what happens. Everybody, or a majority of legislators, according to Ed Koch, signed his Pledge of Allegiance.
Sure, and Andrew Cuomo signaled support for it too.
So maybe it'll go through. And then 3 years from now, you can invite me back and we can measure what impact it had on the legislative process.
Well, I would like that. I actually would like to see you become a regular commentator on this show. I think that you've got obviously a lot of knowledge. Are you really getting out of the public arena, or are you not? You're not done yet, per se?
Well, I'm certainly not going to keep my big mouth shut.
Thank goodness, Richard Ravitch.
But I'm certainly not going to hold any public office.
Okay. Well, we will be checking back in with you. I really want to thank you. It's been a pleasure. It really has.
Same here. Take care.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.